Hare Krishna, everyone. And I just want to say welcome to another Prabhupada Memoirs series. And today we'll be talking to His Grace Anuttama Prabhu. Welcome, Prabhu. And I just want to say to everybody, I am so stoked. I'm so happy that I'm speaking to Prabhu. We've done a few previous conversations, and honestly, I can understand why he's our communication minister. So he is a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and also a member of our GBC, overseeing many zones, as well as I just mentioned, serving as our Iscon communications minister. And he's got 20 years experience in this area. He's also making the next generation leaders by teaching seminars on Iscon leadership and management, Iscon communication courses, the Guru Seminar, and Iscon Disciple course, all of which he has helped co-author with teams and other senior Vaishnavas, which is amazing. And I love the saying that you say, Prabhu. I'm passing as your tagline, which is Iscon and the Vaishnava tradition have great gifts to share. I have faith that as Iscon devotees become more and more qualified to follow and represent Srila Prabhupada and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the great culture of bhakti that they brought to the world will have many tangible and long-lasting positive effects. That was your quote. And on that basis, welcome, dear Prabhu. Thank you for joining us today. What an honor.
Thank you, Jagannath Prabhu. I'm very happy to be here with you. It's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you. And thanks for this series. I think it's wonderful that you're helping devotees around the world remember and connect with Srila Prabhupada. I think that's our future hope, that we can keep focused on the teachings and the example of Srila Prabhupada. So thank you for doing this.
No, thank you, Prabhu. And like I was saying to everyone, it's all about Prabhupada. We're trying to connect up to Srila Prabhupada. And what better way than to talk to the direct disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And as I recall, we've got some fun stories to share, and we'll be going through that. But I would like to start it back, Anuttama Prabhu, with yourself. How did you join the Iscon movement? What was that impetus for yourself to join, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, my story is a little longer, maybe a condensed version. It took me some time. I wasn't one of those people who walked in the temple and knew this was it. I was kind of one of those people that came dragged and kicking, I was a college student in the early 1970s in Michigan, in the United States, where I grew up. And I was becoming increasingly concerned about the state of the world and a lot of problems at that time. The Vietnam War was still going on. There was tremendous conflicts with race relations in the United States, and questions about women's role in society was beginning to kind of percolate up, and so many things like that. Civil rights was a big issue. And I was studying political science and social science in the university, trying to understand, how do we fix these things? That was my idea. How do we fix these things? And particularly, what kind of systems can we create? What kind of government? And I studied a lot of, Marx and Hobbes and Locke and Kant and all these different people and their different political philosophies, and Plato and Aristotle. How do we organize society? And again, long story short, you came to realize that all of these folks, there were flaws in their theories and in their principles and in their practical application. I just came to an understanding that if we're really going to make the world better, we have to change ourselves, right? I think it was Gandhi said, you have to become the change that you want to see in the world. So kind of a little bit of frustration, a little bit of inspiration. Meanwhile, I was a typical college student trying to enjoy my senses like anything, and was becoming very frustrated with that. And it just led me to kind of look into philosophy, and then almost against my will, look into religious philosophy. And I just found that those teachers, I've read what Jesus said. I read a little Bhagavad Gita. I read some of the Buddhist teachings and some of the spiritual ideas that were floating around. It just made so much more sense. And then I started to go to the Krishna temple once in a while. I started going to a church once in a while. I started going to Buddhist retreats. And the thing that I was first and foremost convinced of is there's something more than what I'm learning in the university. There's definitely I have no idea what it is yet, but there's some other truth. So I dropped out of university. At one point, I switched universities to try something else, and left all my friends and girlfriend and everything else behind, and try to see is there anything else. And then I dropped out of that university and traveled around the country, and eventually ended up in a temple in Colorado. and said,
Wow.
okay, we'll try this. And that kind of led to my being. That was about 45 years ago.
My God. And now, you know, we one time when you first met Srila Prabhupada yourself, because I gather in 76 for you, and this was a pivotal time for yourself. You first was in Mayapur Dham, if I'm correct. You traveled to India. So that must have been a bit of a different type of world in those days. How was that?
I came to Iscon in 1975 and was trained to be a book distributor right away. And they had a system, if you distributed books, you got a certain percentage of that money or whatever that you brought in counted towards the trip to India. So I didn't have enough, but I had a dear aunt, Aunt Audrey, who I contacted and said, I've got a motorcycle back in Detroit. I'll sell it someday and give you the money back, but would you loan me the money, go to India? And bless her heart, she did. So I got to go to India in 1976. Otherwise, I never would have seen Srila Prabhupada. So I went as a Bhakta, and I was initiated in Vrindavan in 1976. And that was also difficult for me because I remember standing in the Lotus building. I don't know if it's still there. There was a big painting of Srila Prabhupada on the stairs. And I remember standing there because I was the one big building in those days, a couple of days before my initiation, and thinking like, this is a heavy thing. You know, I'm vowing to, you know, never take any kind of intoxication and have illicit sex and for the rest of my life. This is a very, very heavy thing. But, you know, devotees kind of encouraged me, you know, you'll be okay. Go ahead and do it. So I did it. And I've been trying to do my best ever since.
Wow. And talking of the Lotus building, I think it was in 76 when you went there, you were given a Pacific service, which was very, and I think it's how it's impacted you now as well. Maybe we can go on to that. But what, for the audience, please let us know, what was that service when you were in Mayapur Dham that were given?
Yeah, well, just to put it in context, when I came, you know, I think there's a sense that all the Prabhupada disciples, they got to go on morning walks and they had a lot of letters and they sat at Prabhupada's feet. And I don't know how many, sometime in the future, some PhD Vaishnava person will do a study. But there's a pretty good percentage of Prabhupada disciples that didn't have that opportunity. So I never went on the morning walk. I never wrote a letter or got a letter back from Srila Prabhupada. I had one conversation with him, and that was in Vrindavan. I have a picture of that conversation, actually. If I can.
Wow.
This is, you can see Prabhupada, and that's me standing there, getting the beats.
Picture. We're gonna come on to this in Vrindavan, I gathered it was.
Yep, that's in the Vrindavan temple. And that's the one conversation I had with Srila Prabhupada. He asked me, how many rounds we chant every day? I said 16, and what are the principles you vow to follow? And he gave me my name. So I never had much vapu, you know, physical association with Srila Prabhupada. I was there in Vrindavan that year. I listened to those lectures, but anybody can go back and listen to those same lectures the same way I was able to listen to those lectures. They can probably listen to them better than we did, because I can remember sitting in a very crowded room and looking around, and, you know, half the people were struggling to stay awake, even though Srila Prabhupada was right there. But so I didn't have that much association, but in that sense, so we can talk more about that. But this one service that you mentioned, I was told, I believe it was Hari Sari Prabhu. I'm a little unclear on that. But one of the senior devotees in 1976, when I was in Mayapur, had not got initiated yet, said, I have a service for you, direct service for Srila Prabhupada. So I thought, oh, this is great. What is this? So here it was, my direct service. I was supposed to go upstairs to the roof of the Lotus building immediately after Mangala Arati and hold my hand out at a distance, right? Extend my arm. And I was told, as soon as you can see your hand from the sun, you have to turn off all the lights and run from the top of the building down to the floor and turn off all the lights in the hallway. Because I think a few days or a few weeks before, Prabhupada got very upset because he realized the devotees were wasting Krishna's energy and had chastised some of the managers there. So this was my service to Prabhupada. So, you know, that's one of those kind of things that I think oftentimes, I know when I hear Prabhupada disciples talk about their experiences with Srila Prabhupada, and they're always inspiring, and it's always very, moving to hear how, they oftentimes they just felt Prabhupada looked at them and they felt that connection and those kind of things. I think in addition to our thinking about that, about, what a wonderful experience those devotees had, I think a more important question in most of those stories is, what does that mean to me today? How do we apply that? So it's not so much, isn't that cute? Bhakta Jaff was told to run from the top of the building down to the bottom. But what does that mean in terms of our principles of Krishna consciousness, and how, if we're devotees, we have to see this world belongs to Krishna. It's non-different from Krishna. Chincha Beta Beta Tattva, the material energy is his energy, and to treat the world and issues like climate change and biodiversity. These are issues that we should be concerned about, not just because they're a contemporary issue, which they are, but coming at it from a foundation of what our Krishna philosophy tells us. So that's the way that I try to understand and think about all these stories and histories I hear about Srila Prabhupada.
What I really like is that you mentioned that you didn't have like a major service, etc., with Srila Prabhupada, or your association with Srila Prabhupada. But this one service that was given to you of checking of the lights, make sure that, when you're outside, as soon as you can see your hand, go switch off all the lights, showed how this instruction was so dear to Srila Prabhupada about Krishna's energy. And through that, now even, and I think it'd be good to just bring up a bit of point, because this has actually impacted your life even to today's present time in some of the services you're doing, if I'm correct.
Yes.
And so just on that, if just since we're talking about Krishna's energy, can you please let us know how's that impacting right now, and what projects are on that aspect?
Yeah, as an example of that, I'm working with a group of devotees, including Krishna Kishore Prabhu, who recently finished his PhD at Union Theological University or College in New York City on ecology. I don't get this quite right, I think. Forgive me, Krishna Kishore, if you, but on ecology and also theology.
Yeah.
So we're working what we're currently calling the Iscon Green Team, which is Krishna Kishore. There's a devotee who has a PhD in environmental engineering who's based in Australia, Shamananda. There's another devotee, Ras Vilas Prabhu, who has a PhD. He's a professor also of environmental engineering in Utah. Gopal Leela, who headed up the Bhumi project. And we're working on creating kind of a short thesis about the importance of eco-theology to members of Iscon and Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And then we've been working with a lot of temples around the world to get their input on setting some tiers or some guidelines, how we can be more environmentally conscious as devotees. What are some, and a lot of it's simple things, it starts with very, very simple things of, recycling and reusing and those types of things, and using the right kind of light bulbs. But then it works its way up to, using solar power and all those different kind of things. And it's based on the foundation of our Krishna theology, of understanding that, there are some traditions, some of the Abrahamic traditions now, they've had to kind of go back to their roots, because they seem to have a tradition. I don't know if this is a well-founded one, but it seems to be in the popular eye. The world's just for us. There's God and there's us human beings, and everything else is just for our domination. Sometimes they interpret like that. We don't have that problem if we really look at our theology. Our theology is for servants, and the trees and the birds and the plants and all of life, they're all parts and parcels of Krishna. The whole universe is Krishna's energy. It's his universal form. So for us, that philosophical and theological foundation is there. We just have to put it in practice. So that's something I'm excited to be working with this green team of devotees.
Fantastic. And on that basis, of course, we got isconnews.org area. If people want to get involved or understand more about this, where can we point them to on this aspect? Yeah,
well, a couple of things. One, hoping devotees out there connect through the Iscon News site. That's something that we're putting a lot of energy into. It's been existent for about 10 years, but we're still we're updating and always looking for more writers. People like to write can contact us there. Also, there's a communications, plural, communications.iscon.org, which is a site that you can go to find out more about the communications ministry. And I just want to go back just briefly, Jagannath Prabhu, I didn't mention it. As we're unfolding these green policies, of course, there's devotees around the world doing wonderful things. You look what's been going on for Hungary for, more than a decade. And, go over on Eco Village, there's individual communities, and there's many. There's some in Brazil, other places in India. And that's wonderful. And they're living the lifestyle much more than I am. What we want to particularly talk about is how those of us living in the cities and living in that are not living in a eco-based community can ourselves bring up our standards, our own household and our ashram and our temples, because it's something we should be practicing across the board.
Yeah, thank you so much. And like I've just put, everybody, www.communications.iscon.org, check that out. It's on here right now, and see how you can get involved. This aspect of energy and thinking about energy helps us as well consciously to move to the mode of goodness, because otherwise when wasting, we're in that mode of ignorance. And it's like, it's so nice that these are practical steps, and how Srila Prabhupada in making us think of this, being mindfulness. It's like all these aspects of mindfulness, etc. Srila Prabhupada already has touched on so many times before it's become mainstream, which is amazing. But I want to take back. Yeah.
There's so many stories of like that. You mentioned, here looking at Prabhupada Memoirs, and now, for me, again, I don't have a lot of those personal stories to look back to, but I've got so many other ways of associating with Prabhupada. And I think that's a critical point for devotees that are listening, because those of us that had some Vapu association with Prabhupada, our numbers are diminishing. There's going to be less and less of us.
Yeah.
And there's going to be more and more devotees. They're going to have, have to look at other ways of associating with Prabhupada. And I think that people in my particular part of my generation, others like me, are kind of examples of we didn't have that physical association with Prabhupada, but actually yourself, Jagannatha Prabhu and Jagannath Prabhu and others, there's more opportunity for you to have Prabhupada's association than there was for us. Because even, let's say I was a devotee in the early days and I lived whatever city, New York or Delhi, Prabhupada would come through once in a while and you could hear stories, but the lectures weren't all recorded and distributed everywhere in the world as they are now. The videos hadn't been researched as they have now. The biographies hadn't been written as they have been now. The Leelamrita didn't come till years after Prabhupada had physically departed. So you have a better chance of really going deep and studying Prabhupada. And even if I was with Prabhupada, maybe I'm in the room with Prabhupada, he's giving a lecture, and then I go to do some service. Somebody else is in their room capturing what happened next. And you can go back and read that now, through that historical eye, and hear from 6 different devotees who are in the room at the same time and get their perspective on things. So the opportunity to associate with Prabhupada is it's increasing. It's not decreasing. It's increasing.
That is so true. Like hearing about the moon landing, speaking to certain individuals that were in the room, certain Prabhupada disciples, it was so nice to get the angles from the different areas and how it works. And this is the beauty that you set that foundation for us, that we can now take it to the next level. There's something I want to bring up, what I thought was really nice. Gayatri just said, I love what Anuttama Prabhu is saying and the projects around saving Krishna's energy. I watched David Attenborough's documentary on life on Earth and was wondering how, as Grahastha devotees living in cities, can further be more cautious about what we use and how we use materials gifted to us. So I just want to say, what you're talking, people are feeling, they want to do this. But yeah, any comments before we go on?
Just to support what Gayatri said, that we're still kind of putting the pieces in place. We're doing some final editing on this document on eco-theology and fine-tuning the tiers. And we're going to be rolling that out within the next few months. So just suggest to devotees that are sensitive or concerned or curious about these issues, pay attention, because Gopal Leela in New York City and Krishna Kishore and Shamanand in Australia, we're not going to be able to go to every temple and give seminars and talk about these things. So we're going to be looking for what we're kind of conceiving of green champions at local temples who make this a priority and share the information and take responsibility to do the things that we need to do at all our temples, and then to bring it home, especially with young people. I think it's critical for kids and younger people to realize, if you're going to be a devotee, Prabhupada would sometimes criticize about, as an example, And he said wonderful things about Lord Jesus Christ and Christian priests he met. But as an example, he would sometimes criticize that certain Christians, they go to church on Sunday and they beg forgiveness for their sins, and then they go out on Monday and do other nonsense. And I think in a similar way as devotees, we can't think, well, I go to the temple on Sunday, or I get up and chant my japa in the morning, and then I live my life like every other materialistic person. Or even worse, because I'm a devotee, I become callous to everything else. I can be rude to the lady on the bus because I'm a devotee and she's just a materialistic person, and I'm thinking about Krishna, Hare Krishna, blah, 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 blah. That's not what I understand. And again, I think we see that from Prabhupada's life, and I think of stories. I've been rereading the Lilamrita recently, and I would strongly encourage devotees to spend some time with that. My other favorite is Mukunda Maharaj's book, Miracle on Second Avenue. Shamasundar's Prabhu, he's got 2 volumes out now. And when you read, about how Prabhupada was so lighthearted, and Prabhupada had fun, and he joked with the devotees. At the same time, we know he was very grave. But, things like when Prabhupada was staying with Sally Agarwal, and, there's pictures of Prabhupada playing with their little kid, her baby, who wasn't walking yet. And you think about, sannyasis aren't supposed to do those kind of things. Well, I think Vaishnava sannyasis are, from the example from Prabhupada. Prabhupada taught us that it's not about, some ashram or this or that. I mean, the ashrams are there to support us, but the most important thing is the heart of the Vaishnava. And again, this idea comes out, stories of Prabhupada. Prabhupada's living with Sally Agarwal, and he's living down the street at the YMCA. And he's coming to her home in the evening, and they're inviting their friends over. She mentions we had quite an intellectual crowd. They drive all the way from Pittsburgh, which is, I guess, an hour away, some of these people. But she was not a vegetarian. And Prabhupada was cooking in her kitchen, and Prabhupada's keeping his stuff in her refrigerator with her non-vegetarian things. A lot of tolerance there. And Prabhupada came at least one time, it's explained in Lilamrita. He came to her home. She was a little late with dinner. She said, Swamiji, I'm so sorry. We're still cleaning up. The smell must be very disturbing to you. We think, well, Prabhupada could have said, yeah, you nonsense meat eater, and do you realize how many births you're going to have to take? That's not what he said, because he understood the time, the place, and the circumstance. And what he said to her, quote, think nothing of it. Now, okay, does that mean that, we support meat eating? Obviously not. Does that mean that we think there's, it's not a terrible thing? It's just bad for the planet, for your karma, for the animals, everything else. Of course, we have strong convictions. But Prabhupada was a gentleman in understanding the circumstances. And you go back and listen to the tape of Sally Agarwal today, and I met that lady. She's a wonderful woman. And she said in one video, she said those few days that Prabhupada, Swamiji, as she called him, was with us, she said, those are the most memorable days of my life. The most memorable days of my life. She begins to cry. So I think that when you hear Prabhupada Memoirs, I think we're disciples and grand disciples, and in the future grand disciples. And really our lives are meant to be transformed by these stories. They're not little cute stories. They're meant to be examples for us all to see, well, how do I become tolerant like that? High standard for myself, but very much understanding and flexible with others.
You know what's really lovely? I can see as soon as you'll be talking about this, because I can see the lights going up and up from the different multiple places. We've had 650 likes come in from your points that you're making. So I want to just put it out to everybody that's listening. If you're liking what you're hearing, share this. Share this to your pages. Share this around. These type of things, we want it to live on. We want it to, all this information, like as Anuttama Prabhu was saying, the stories about Sally Agarwal. Now you're hearing from Anuttama Prabhu himself about Srila Prabhupada. And I had a comment come through. Ami Anand said, such a wonderful point. We have constant association with Srila Prabhupada. It is increasing, like you were talking before. So on that point, if you're liking what you're hearing, everybody, share. That's what I want to say. So
that's our Vaishnava mood.
That's it. Yeah, actually, it's true.
It's all about sharing. Something I just read the other day, again in Lilamrita. I don't know how many times I read it, but I just recently I read the first volume. When I finished, I went back and reread the whole thing from the beginning because I really wanted to remember some things. There's one little story, but it's almost like every story is meaningful. There was this problem with this Mr. Price. I'm not sure if that was actually his name. That's the name that's given in the Leela. Sometimes they change the names and things like that, protect the innocent, as they say. But this Mr. Price was some kind of real estate agent. Devotees were young and naive. Prabhupada was in New York, then he went to San Francisco. This Mr. Price was helping him find a building. And he turned out to just be, you know, scallywag. I think, is that a British term? He was just, you know, a rascal. You know? And somehow he got them. Prabhupada said, you know, whatever you do, get a signed document. And he was giving them all these instructions. And they didn't follow Prabhupada's instructions, right? So they ended up, I think we gave him a check for, I think it was $10,000. And, you know, as soon as they gave him the check, the man's whole mood changed. Well, you know, now you have to get the rest of the money within 30 days or you're going to lose everything. And they realized they've been cheated. They've been swindled. And Prabhupada immediately got involved and, he's fighting, he's writing letters. And when Prabhupada came back through his personal, the lawyers even said, I think he lost the money. But Prabhupada, you know, this is Krishna's money. And he got involved and he threatened the man and, with legal action and so many things. And they ended up getting the money back. So that shows Prabhupada willing to fight for Krishna. But the part I want to particularly emphasize that I just saw when I reread this version again, at the end of it, Prabhupada specifically said, we got the money back. We don't need to do anything else. Christian devotees are not interested in vengeance. So, okay, he tried to cheat us. He's a bad guy. We undid his wrong. We're not concerned with vengeance. And I think these are the kind of things that just make me think like, yeah, we're meant to manifest these Krishna devotional love of God, love of every living entity qualities in our lives as practical. So those little stories like that are so meaningful for us.
Yeah. This is the gems. And I want to come back. We're going to transport ourselves back to 1976. We were in Mayapur. We said the story about the light and the service. And then a month later, the big day came. You went to Vrindavan. And there you took initiation, like we saw that photo that you showed us.
Yes.
Can I ask, how did that feel, taking initiation? Now you're getting that association, that connection with Srila Prabhupada. What was that? What was going through your mind at that time? And how was that experience for you?
I think I was scared. Because it was a huge commitment. And I remember I might have told this story when you and I met before, but going back a little before, the very first night I moved into the temple, and I wasn't sure if this was what I was supposed to do. And I think Krishna leads us like that. That's been my experience in my life, that he just shows you enough to kind of say, well, if you're really sincere, here's a little step you can take towards me, but I'm not going to hit you over the head with it, because then you have no free will. So I'm just going to kind of like, ring a bell in the corner. And if you're really curious, is Krishna there? Okay, you'll come and look. So if you're not, well, you can go on with your materialistic life. And I was scared. I mean, going back even earlier, as a college student and reading things like in the Bible where Jesus would say things like, if you knock, the door will open. I was like, well, I better knock. And he had this parable of the seeds thrown on the ground, and some of them take root, and some of them they grow up with weeds and they die. And some of them, the birds come and take them away. And I really knew he was talking about spiritual life. So I moved in the temple, and I prayed to Krishna that very first night, or God. I said, I don't know who you are. God, Rama, Allah, Jehovah, Yahweh, Krishna, whoever you are, I'm trying to take this next step towards you. Please show me what's to do. I don't want to go back to my materialistic life. So the same way when I got initiated, I know there's wonderful souls that are much, much more advanced than I ever can hope to be, who just had that deep sense of commitment. And I didn't. For me, it was like, okay, I'm taking this promise and I'm going to do my best. And I mean, it wasn't like I took it whimsically. In my era, I remember people got initiated and the next day moved out. I mean, it was a little strange, and I always thought, how can you do that? You just took a vow, But I felt some sense of fear and sense of, I'm going to really need your help, Krishna, to do this. I live in a society. I mean, I remember when I first visited a temple in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and the devotees first told me about the 4 regulative principles. I was a college student, right? Well, you ever heard about the 4 principles? No illicit sex, no meeting, no gambling, no intoxication. I was so much steeped in ignorance. My response was, well, what do you do? If you don't do those 4 things, what else is there in life? You know, I mean, because I was a college student. It's all about just trying to maximize field experience. I mean, that's the depth of it. So to make a vow, it was a very, very, very serious thing. And then I remember immediately after, it was a very hot, very austere, sitting in the sun-drenched, you know, courtyard of the Vrindavan temple. And then immediately afterwards, they said, okay, all the disciples now stick around and clean up. So I was like, okay, now I got to take it seriously. I just wanted to get out of it, but it's like, no, now you made a vow. Okay, so put it into practical action.
That's it's not just the theory, it's the practice as well. We got to, and this is another thing as well. I think when we were conversing before, the aspect of the theoretical knowledge and how in Iscon we are putting into practice. We were having just a discussion on this at one point, and maybe we could touch at some point on that as well. Let's see how the convos go. That's all right with you, Prabhu. But you know, so it's really nice and so amazing that even then you were feeling scared. It's like something, what's going to happen? You're seeing people going after one day after taking initiation, but you've like stuck it out. You've stuck it out all this time, to the extent where you are now a person that is helping steer the Iscon boat and helping us to connect even more closer to Srila Prabhupada and to the movement, you know, with you as a GBC member and also as our communications minister as well. So on this, what is it for you that has helped keep that connection strong and keep you still within our lovely, beautiful movement, Iscon?
I think, like I mentioned, the one thing, trying to connect with Srila Prabhupada. I remember as a young devotee having some difficulties in going to my temple president, Savasprabhu, who's now the president of LA Temple. And I remember him telling me, it sounds like your connection with Prabhupada is not very strong. You know, you've got to go back, you've got to read, you've got to hear, you've got to chant in that mood, you got to strengthen that connection. So I think that's one thing. Connection with our founder Charya, with our gurus. We all have many gurus. We have Diksha Guru, we have Siksha Gurus, we have the founder Charya. Make sure that connection is strong. And then in a more general way, association with devotees. Sometimes I think in our immaturity, we have a thought that I'm supposed to become a lot more advanced, a lot quicker than I am right now, and we become frustrated with that. Sometimes we've been to Soup's done a whole study on this. There's some Christian writers and theologians perhaps that have studied this tendency to put too much pressure on ourselves. And then we falsely portray ourselves to be something we're not, and inside struggling like crazy. So I think a very, very important thing is to cultivate relationships with devotees, friends that we can talk to, that we can go to from time to time. I mean, that's the whole principle of Priti Lakshana, be able to reveal our minds in confidence and inquire confidentially, to be able to have a friend or two and be able to go and say, you know, I heard this today in class and I'm really struggling with this. I don't know what this means, or I'm having this difficulty with the devotees, or I'm having this difficulty with my mind, or my senses are really disturbed. And, you know, let's talk about it. I remember years ago, His Holiness Jayapataka Swami came to Denver. We had a whole bunch of brahmacharis. And he gave a class. He was talking about Jamunacharya, who talked about, whenever I think of sex life, I spit at the thought. And, you know, in one sense, you can think about, okay, how fallen I am because I'm not that realized. I don't spit at the thought. I'm still attracted to the opposite gender and this and that. And, you know, the illusion of romantic love and everything. But Maharaj pointed out that the fact that he said that showed even an exalted soul like that, occasionally those thoughts come. The fact that he said it, I spit at the thought, showed those. So it kind of took the pressure out of the room for me. It was like, oh, okay. So if I have those thoughts, I'm not a demon. There's still a chance that Krishna will. And we know, you know, none of us are demons. Sometimes we act in demoniac ways, or we have acted in demoniac ways, or there are people that act in demonic ways. Our philosophy is everybody's a devotee of Krishna. Everybody. They've just forgotten to different degrees. So you know, it reminds me of the story with Prabhupada and Shyamasundar Prabhu when he was asked in San Francisco to carve the first Jagannath deities. Famous story, but such an important one.
Mm.
And Shyamasundar Prabhu, at that time, he was still smoking cigarettes. He's carving Jagannath and smoking cigarettes. And Prabhupada came in, and as the story's told, he even had the pack of cigarettes on the unfinished deity's head. And Prabhupada came in and, you know, swept off those cigarettes, as I recall, I think with his cane even, he swept. But then the most significant part is he told Shyamasundar, don't let such a small thing come between you and Krishna. Don't let such a small thing. And then he told him, just smoke one less a day. For me, this is such an important example from Prabhupada. We have a tendency, you know, if I've got materialistic thoughts, or, you know, if somebody's doing something, they're not following the regulated principles, or, you know, the materialistic people, they're doing, yeah, we know those are terrible things, and we're strict about it. And we understand it takes sometimes, you know, when we take our vows, of course, we have to do our very, very best. But people just coming on board, you know, Prabhupada just smoke one less every day. Make some progress. Make one step towards Krishna. And when we remember that, you know, how much Krishna loves us, you know, and he's in our heart as Paramatma, and he sends the pure devotee, and he appears in the holy name, and he comes as Lord Chaitanya, says, forget the qualifications, just chant. You know? I mean, that's the ethos of who we are, and that's the ethos of our founder Acharya. And I think that when we remember that, I think that's the greatest impetus, the mercy, you know, the love that's there from Krishna. And that as you know, materialistic and fallen and maybe sinful in the past we are or were, you know, Krishna's mercy is there for us. That's the nature of the personality of Godhead. And even more than some of the Abrahamic traditions, as an example, most of their interpretations, their tradition, we say, even if you mess up, okay, you got, you know, it's a horrible thing. You got to go through the cycle of a few more births, maybe a lot of births, but he never gives up on us. He never gives up on us. And just, what kind of person is that? How can I not try to serve that personality? How can I not try to love that personality who all he asks is that I awaken my love for him? I mean, what a philosophy, what a goal, what a vision, what an inspiration. You know,
that shows this aspect of love through our actions. As Srila Prabhupada showed there about this, like you're talking about cigarette case being on the top. He could have just straight away gone, hey, what are you doing? He could have, you know, like sometimes you see devotees, sometimes they go straight into the judge mood instead of like, why is he doing like this? Why is this happening, etc. But here, Srila Prabhupada showing us that the aspect of compassion and how we need to be to others. I really love the story. Thank you for sharing. And actually, somebody else that really loves it is Gauri Prasad Kunda. He says, many thanks to Anuttama Prabhu for his sharing such of his valuable experience of life. I feel so lucky. Thank you, sir. And same here, we're feeling it. So thank you for that. So I think on this aspect, this practical aspect of what you're talking about in Krishna consciousness, Srila Prabhupada shows us how to be, and how we can ourselves be empowered to be, should we say, ambassadors to try and work on some of these aspects. Like you're talking about at the start, we talked about being more green, but now there's other things. Because this has impacted you to the extent where you are our GBC, member of our GBC. You were the chair for the GBC 2014, 2015. And also you do other services, like, of course, you're the Iscon communication minister, but also in the UK, you are our head for child protection officer side of things as well. So
I'm the advisor to the child protection office.
So yeah,
I played a role, and I've been part of drafting the actual official documents ever since it was created in 1997, 1998. Every 5 years or so, they revamp those. So I'm a part of that and serve as advisor to the international group. And I think, since you touched on that, I think that's an example. I also was part of the team that drafted the North American and later the global policies on domestic abuse.
Yes.
And I think these things are very important. I mentioned you the other day, and I meant to look it up. I don't have the exact quote, But Abraham Lincoln, one of the famous thinkers and presidents of the United States back in the days when presidents were more respected, and lived a lot differently than many modern people do, our leaders today. But he said something to the effect of, I don't have much respect for someone's religion if their donkey, the mode of travel in those days for most, if their donkey and their dog is not better because of it. And I think, that kind of resonates for me. I gave up my kind of ancestral religious tradition. My family were what I describe as non-practicing Christians, nice people, but, very, very secular people. But I left that because I felt there was too much hypocrisy, and people weren't really living what they said they were. Now, since that time, I have many, many Christian friends. I have many, many Muslim friends, and people of other traditions too, Jewish, etc. I spend a lot of time with Muslims and Christians in particular. And I've come to see that there's many, many people following those traditions who are very deep in their commitment. And I think we have to be careful, because sometimes we criticize, say, we meet superficial Christians who just think, well, Jesus saved me, that's all I have to do. We have to be very careful we don't fall into the same trap. Well, I'm a devotee of Krishna. Krishna is the highest revelation. Lord Chaitanya is the most merciful incarnation, and therefore everything's fine. No, that just means we have a special opportunity, and it means we've a special gift, and we should take care. The Jews talk about being the chosen people. That's their special gift. The Christians talk about being saved. That's their special gift. We also have a special gift. But if you have a special gift and you just put it on the shelf and you brag to everybody, look at the special gift, but you never open it, you never put it into practice, you never apply it, you never share it with others, you don't really have that gift. So we have a gift, and we have a little bit of a burden with that. And as Prabhupada said, it's a burden of love, but it's really, really, really something important. And I think it gets back to what you mentioned earlier, is practical application. For me, that's what Krishna consciousness is all about. The world is really a mess today. I mean, you look at the climate change, and you look at the biodiversity, the number of species that are dying. You look at the amount of civil unrest and wars that is going on in the world, and political, the strife politically between countries. People really need, Christian conscious values. And at the same time, people are turning away from traditional religion. I was listening to a webinar yesterday. I don't have the numbers right here in front of me. In the past 7 years, like the number of people in the United States that went from identifying as Christians, the predominant faith here, is down something like, 7%. And the number of nuns, N-O-N-E-S, don't affiliate with anything is way on the rise.
Got you.
So why is that? It's because they're let down by, traditional organized religion. And we have to be careful we don't become, or we're not, another one of those organizations that just walks around with our head up thinking we're something special. Tamal Krishnaraj gave a seminar in Dallas, Texas years ago to the communications people. He gave a little lecture, and he started out, he said, we cannot think we're God's gift to mankind. We have to stop thinking we're God's gift to mankind. We're humble servants, and if you're humble servants, it means you gotta walk your talk. And our talk can be all about, we know so much about Ras Leela and the personality of Krishna and God's balloon, he plays a flute. For most people, it's utterly meaningless. If your dog and your donkey, if your kids and your neighbors and your wife and your husband and your employees and your fellow workers and the bus driver, if your Vaishnavism is not improving the way you interact with those people, well, then, where's your Vaishnavism? Where's the proof of your Vaishnavism? If we treat each other harshly, if we allow ourselves to become, prejudiced against whatever. You got a white body, you don't like black bodies, you're black, you wonder about whites, or you're brown, or this or that, or, we got a whole history in our tradition of mistreating women, a long and sad history. I'll put another plug up. I don't know how many of you have seen this book, The Emergence of Women's Voices in Iscon. It's a collection of, as it says, letters, articles, papers, conference reports for 20 years. It's gut-wrenching and heartbreaking to read that book, and to realize some of the And of course, many women had, wonderful experiences, and hopefully almost all women, ideally all the women do today. But, you read history, we made a lot of mistakes, and we have to learn from that history. So some of these things about child protection, domestic abuse, the environment, these are things that for me give a lot of inspiration. How do we walk our talk as devotees?
No, thank you so much. And it's this practical aspect. This is what I really loved about Srila Prabhupada, that, you talked about the burden of love. You mentioned that, which is such a nice way of putting it. And then Srila Prabhupada was feeling this so much, and he understood that he wanted to put some type of structure in place that people understand what is our purpose. What is our purpose we're doing? Why are we doing this? And then, of course, was born the 7 purposes of Iscon. And I was wondering if I can bring that up so we can just talk. And I've just put it here. So these 7 purposes of Iscon, Anuttama Prabhu, if we can please, your thoughts and Srila Prabhupada, how this works, and your thoughts on this aspect would be really appreciated.
Yeah, well, for the devotees that don't know, these are the 7 purposes Prabhupada approved that were written into the original incorporation documents of Iscon. And today, I think they're still there, and they're meant to be, and every single one of our incorporation documents, or the legal documents that establish Iscon in different parts of the world. So, to kind of use the more modern terminology, I see these as the mission statement of Iscon. And they're beautiful. And just to look at the first one in particular, what is the purposes of Iscon? I've got a copy of it here. I'm looking to the side. Yeah. To systematically propagate spiritual knowledge. Who are we? What's our purpose? To systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large. Everybody, no discrimination. And to educate all peoples, plural, in the techniques of spiritual life. Why? In order to check the imbalance of values in life and to achieve real unity and peace in the world. And then there's other descriptions of, propagate the knowledge of Krishna, bring the members together based on understanding of Krishna, teach Sankirtan, to build, holy places, temples, promote more natural way of life, book distribution. These are our core purposes. And I think, I have them printed out, and I have it hanging on my wall to remind me daily or throughout the day, what's my purpose? What's our purpose? And it's beautiful. I mean, sometimes, people, well, what's the Christian conscious movement all about? Well, we're trying to propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large and share techniques on how we can actually address the imbalance in values in life and promote real unity and peace. Wow. That's beautiful. Yes, most people, what's your purpose in life? Well, I'm trying to buy a Harley Davidson motorcycle, or, I'm going to go to Bermuda for vacation next year, or I want to become the vice president of finance, or I'm trying to increase the profits of our company by 1% per quarter over the next 8. I mean, you got to do those things. We live in the world, you got to have your job. But what more inspiring mission? And it includes everybody. This is what's so beautiful about it. There's so much strife in the world these days, but our philosophy is inclusive. And to the extent that we're not thinking like that, the extent that we don't see women as equal spirit souls. I mean, there's different, bodily functions, and obviously like that. I'm not able to give birth to a child. I can't feed a child through my bodily functions. I mean, I'm pretty restricted in that regard. And there may be some things that maybe I can do. They're talking about men generally, like not all, but men are like the upper body strength is about 1/3 stronger than most women. Women have, my wife and I had a business for many years, and I was the one male on the management team. And we'd have management meetings sometimes. And the topic would be something like, planning for the Christmas season. And I'd be going down my list. And, one of the managers of one of our stores would start saying, well, did you see the new line of such and such designer that just came in? And somebody else would say, well, did you hear we're having some problems with such and such employee? And another one. And I would kind of sit back, and somehow they were all having this like multitasking conversation. I'd be completely lost. Seriously, this is my true life experience. And I have to stop and say, ladies, excuse me, please forgive me. There's a man in the room. My brain works differently. I'm a little more linear. You're able to multitask. And, you can read the research. Scientists, they show women have a different type of intelligence than men have. And it doesn't mean that all men are linear and can't do some of the things, there's like, the curve, the graphs, some women are much better tennis players than their male counterparts, for sure. As an example, we can't say all men are better tennis players. That would be absurd. We can't say that all women are better parents. That would be absurd. But there may be tendencies. Women generally have a propensity for more caring and more nurture. Many women have. So there's differences there. So we can recognize those differences, but they have to be based on individuality. That's our philosophy. We can't prejudge. You mentioned judgment earlier. Jesus got it right when he said, judge not, lest you be judged. You go anywhere in the world and there's some part in the world they don't like me. I go someplace, I go to India, there's certain temples, I can't get in the door. I got the wrong color skin. Yeah. So if I think that's wrong, I got to make sure that's not a principle. There's some places I can't maybe do certain things, maybe because of my gender, this and that. That's not who we are. And I would encourage us all in a respectful way. We have to stand up against those kind of things. I was recently reading in this emergence book. If I may, can I read a little something?
Yeah, please. Let's. Yeah.
Okay. Prabhupada talks a little of the history of India in a lecture, I believe, in Seattle. I think it's a lecture. No, excuse me, it's Rome, 1974. Prabhupada says there are a number of, he said Mohammedans, they prefer these days to Muslims. They protested that India is going to be independent, but we do not wish to participate with the Hindus. We must be separate. Why? Prabhupada asked why. Because they have got a bad experience that the Hindus do not treat them very well. Even Sudra, still reading Prabhupada's lecture, even Sudra in South India, it was the process, so bad process. If the Sudra is walking on the street, he has to cry, I am Sudra, passing on the street. Please close your door. The Brahmana would close their doors so they would not even see a Sudra. Then everything will be spoiled. Their food grains and everything. They were closed. And Prabhupada goes on to talk about how, that the whole split in India said that, people that became Muslims, so many of them, and of course, religious freedom and anybody wants to practice whatever they want, great. But we also acknowledge there's social pressures sometimes on people. Prabhupada's saying these people were Indians, but they were not given any facility for spiritual culture. The Brahmanas monopolized. This isn't me. I'm not reading from some, editorial in the Dhaka Express and in South India, whatever. The Brahmanas monopolized it. Although they would not do anything, they were all degraded by the state, and they would keep those Sudras and Chandalas downtrodden. So our movement, to systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large, we're supposed to be advocates of the downtrodden. I mean, we're downtrodden. It's Kali Yuga. We're all born low-born, and Mahaprabhu came to save us. So I think that's such an important thing for us. And I personally feel we have to be very, very careful. Mahaprabhu was, what are some of the most famous things we hear about Mahaprabhu? His discussion with the Chankansi. What was that about? That was about the power structure was saying, you people are not allowed to worship God in this way. And, Lord Jesus Christ, he went into the temple, different tradition, but the same principle is there. He's teaching bhakti. He's teaching love of God. He went into the temple and they were all like, he said he overturned. He got a little violent, you could say. He didn't hurt anybody, but he's overthrowing the temples. There's tables. There's all these tables. They're changing the money for the people that want to come and buy animals and go sacrifice them in the temple, whatever they're doing. He's like, you're defiling my father's house. And they got upset. You're letting all these lower class people. Mahaprabhu, you're letting all these lower class people. Prabhupada, he was criticized. Prabhupada was, there's another quote, if you don't mind, I'll just read. This is, there's so many quotes. Prabhupada talks about how, let's see, I'm not finding it right now. Anyway, the reference where Prabhupada talks about, he was very inclusive in his preaching, and some people, they criticize him because he was inclusive, specifically that, boys and girls can eat. He uses the word equal. Prabhupada uses the word equal, can equally be engaged in Krishna consciousness. And of course, he says, we're very strict about the way they can associate, but they should be given facilities. And that's, when you study Prabhupada's life, that's who he is. And that's what Vaishnavism is. And I think that's what Iscon is. And we have to be very, very careful that we don't allow this tendency to separate and isolate and become a caste conscious organization. We are the anti-caste organization. We understand people have different tendencies. We should engage people in different tendencies, but we have the vision they're all equal. We value everybody. We don't start thinking, you're in the back of the bus. That's not Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu said, everybody come out on the street. So I think that, when we look at Prabhupada, Prabhupada was criticized. You go into the West, you engage in these low-born people. Mahaprabhu was criticized, Prakashananta Saraswati. Why are you associating with low-born people? Bhakti is about associating with low-born people. We're all low-born. It's about giving everybody the opportunity. So I think that inclusiveness, I think that's so critical. I was rereading the other day just this story, 1976, under the influence of some young, overly exuberant sannyasis, they influenced the GBC to pass a resolution. All the women and all the married men have to move out of the temples. Some devotees know this history. We need to study our history. This is their idea. The celibates, the brahmacharis, only they can live in the temples. And the temple presidents came to Prabhupada and said, if you do this, we're going to lose most of our devotees. And, we're going to stop our preaching. And Prabhupada thought about it for a day or two, and he overturned the decision, and he sent Tamal Krishna Maharaj to China. Of course, we know later a glorious history of what he accomplished in China, but Tamal Krishna Maharaj later regretted, and he wrote some things about how I was really off. I was off on that, but he pushed that through. And Prabhupada said, you can't do that. He said, look at the wonderful service that these grihastas and these women are performing. We are not an organization that discriminates like that. So we have to be very, very careful about that.
No, thank you so much. Like you said, society at large. And so that number one, you've so systematically, methodically just went and broke that aspect down so we can understand what we're trying to do, especially for unity and peace in the world. It's so important. So maybe some of the others that are, should we say, touching you, it'd be lovely to hear a few points on those, if you don't mind, Prabhu, from your side.
Well, again, I mean, when I rereading and looking at Prabhupada, that's our theme here, Prabhupada's example and connecting with Prabhupada, reading about Prabhupada in his early years before he came to the West, and about how he struggled so much. So, I mean, there's, the printer, when he was going to try to get his magazine, Back to God magazine printed, and, the printer would say, Swamiji, have you had a meal yet today?
Yeah.
And Prabhupada sometimes didn't have enough money to pay for printing food, but he was printing his magazine. And Prabhupada's out in the street in New Delhi trying to, interest people in his Back to God, and he was gored by a cow, and Prabhupada had heat stroke, and he, collapsed in the middle of the street. And luckily someone who knew him happened by and, helped him up. I mean, those were the risks, those are the sacrifices that Prabhupada made. We all know about, the heart attacks on the Jaladuta and all that, that's other examples, but it's not like that with just that unique situation, but, the sacrifices that Prabhupada made. And, it's so inspiring. And yet here's a person that sacrificed everything. And one of the lectures that I've heard, it just really inspires me so much. Prabhupada was speaking about, if we just chant Hare Krishna sincerely, everything will come. If you just chant Hare Krishna sincerely, everything will come. And then he paused and he said, what sincerely? If you just chant, sincerity will come.
Wow,
okay, if you just chant sincerely, but I'm not sincere, I'm not, so there's no hope for me.
Well, thank you. So
such a merciful tradition. I mean, such a merciful tradition.
Prabhu, what's amazing is this is so important for, when I was speaking to Anuttama Prabhu, he was talking about these 7 principles that sometimes it's important we go back to the basics. We understand by reading Srila Prabhupada's books, understanding the mood of Srila Prabhupada. These 7 principles that you're seeing on the screen, imbibe into your hearts, because going forward, this is what we need to do. Sometimes we talk about vision, mission statements. I know I've been doing that with some of the programs I'm, helping with. And what do we come back to? It's these 7 purposes. And when we connect more with Srila Prabhupada, then the mercy will begin. So I just want to say thank you, because Anuttama Prabhu, when speaking to you, you went straight to it and you said it's all about, you know, these 7 purposes. How do we connect back with Srila Prabhupada? So I just wanted everyone to just know that. Please, this is recorded as well, so refer back to it. You can find this also at any place. I would say even go to isconnews.org and you will find information there. So I just want to, we're coming towards the end and we could go on so long, and we will probably, I'm going to ask Prabhu publicly here that I'm praying we can have him back on again and we can talk about another aspect of Srila Prabhupada, which would be fantastic.
I'll put in a quick plug for at least for those hearing this now, maybe not in recorded history. The 3rd annual mantra retreat that previously was held in New Vrindavan, we're doing it virtually this year, November 20, 21, and 22. We'll be sending more information out about that. You can go to mantra, like as in mantra, but mantraretreat.org. We'll be updating that site soon with more information about the men's retreat. So
here it is, everybody. Mantra. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Right. Mantraretreat.org. Only our communications minister would have this play on words and hit it like that. So I'm really excited, and that's happening in October right now. So check it out.
November 2021, 22.
So 21 and 22 of November. Please check this out. And also, you'll see what's scrolling down at the bottom of your slide, of your screens right now, is all this information. If you want to know a bit more, connect by www.isconnews.org. And as Prabhu also said, he is our communications minister. So you can also check www.communications.iscon.org for all your communication needs. You learn a bit more about how can you get involved, how can you help make this Srila Prabhupada's movement go to the next level. So these are your things. It's up to all of us, and you can hear, here Uttama Prabhu is just speaking about this. Let's go that deeper. Let's try to understand the mood of Srila Prabhupada. And I also say thank you to everyone that's joined today, and your comments and questions. There was a few comments made, like this was from Chudamani Dasi. She said, every temple and preaching center has to have the 7 principles displayed in prominent place. Chudamani Dasi, thank you. So this is now coming to the light. Let's do that. Let's take it back to the place where Srila Prabhupada wanted us to be. And I just want to say thank you for all your inspiration, Anuttama Prabhu. You are one of those stalwarts that has stood the test of time. You've been there from close to the start, and now you are helping, help make the next leaders in Iscon, help inspire us. So I just want to say, on behalf of the Prabhupada Memoirs team and myself, I just want to say thank you so much for taking your time out and letting us know a little bit more about you and your connection to Srila Prabhupada. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks to your whole team for this important service of helping devotees remember, reconnect, be always connected with Prabhupada and our whole line. We have a glorious line of acharyas.
There we go. Let's do that. Thank you, everyone. And please have a good Saturday, and stay safe. Wherever you're in the world, stay safe.
Yes.
And Hare Krishna.